Hello everyone! Again. Today I wanted to talk about probably my favorite reproduction sword that I own, and I don't know why I haven't had the chance to discuss it so far. This is a reproduction Ming era saber from sword maker LKChen, and it is just a delight. I can't talk more happily about it. This is the LKChen Yan-Ling-Dao, which refers to the shape of the saber. If we pull it out, it's got a very gentle profile. The Yan-Ling-Dao or Yan-Ling-Dao in English collectors is characterized by how much curvature it has. So the tips of these sabers sometimes had slightly different profiles, but what distinguishes them as Yan-Ling-Dao is the fact that they're straight for the majority of their length, and then just have a very bit of a gentle curve towards their end. This particular example was based largely on an antique original that was in Peter Decker's collection from the Mandarin Mansion. Real beautiful. Peter Decker does amazing research and has a spectacular collection, of course. It's been modified slightly. The original one had a little bit of a shorter grip, and LKChen decided to extend it. The amount that he's increased it is within that which you can find on originals, so it's not considered anachronistic or ahistorical, but it isn't a one-to-one reproduction perhaps, but it is worth noting that it's a slight modification on the original. The type of fittings on this are called fengshui fittings, which are kind of angular in shape. Later on, towards the late Qing, you have more rounded, called yunshu fittings. The yunshu fittings tend to be more commonly seen on sabers that have angled hilts or angled grips, and on a different type of blade called Lu-Yerdao, which have a more curved profile. So this blade exhibits two beautiful fullers, one running a little bit longer than the other, and over here on the tip it's got a little bit of a false edge. It's not sharp, it's brought to a good point. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it on the camera there, but it's got a nice strong spine running right up until where the false edge begins, and then it's brought in. It could be sharpened if you wanted it to, but instead that's going to help bring, there's all sorts of debate as to why some sabers have a prominent false edge. We could talk about Turkish designs and the very large yeomans that are used for reverse strikes and false edge cuts. This particular one does not look like that's what it was used for, so perhaps it's to aid in the thrust. The edge that came, the factory edge that came on the blade, is spectacular. So it came quite sharp out the back. Not quite razor sharp, but very sharp, more than sharp enough for any type of cutting test. I'll include some footage of some of the demonstration cutting tests on there. You can see it has a very nice thick spine here at the base, continuing all the way up to the end. It features this Hushou Pan disc guard, which is typical of things that you'll see starting in mid-Ming. So going back to what this represents a very common military sidearm called a peidao, so a waist-worn military saber that you would start to see in the Ming Dynasty. It's easy to think that curved sabers, instead of just completely straight back sabers, did not exist until after the Mongol invasion. That's a suggestion that's been around for a long time that I myself have promulgated. We actually start to see curved blades perhaps very slightly before the Mongol period in the Song Dynasty. And the disc guards actually were even earlier than that, sometimes in the as early as the Tang. However, following the Yuan, the Mongol invasions and the suppression of the native Han, the guards all turned into more of a cross design, and those went away. All of the saber designs were following that of the more Turkic style. They had a more prominent curve. They had a cross or a star guard design, and the disc guard was basically retired. So even though this looks a little bit like a Japanese tsuba, that didn't seem to return to China until maybe around the beginning of the 16th century, around 1500 or so. So this particular design, the fittings that are on here are probably closer to the beginning of the 17th century, so right towards the end of the Ming Dynasty. And again, as I mentioned, the Fengshu style fittings are actually early Qing, is where you'd more commonly see it than in Ming. But this is, again, a beautiful example of what you would find on commonly armed infantrymen have in the Ming Dynasty. Its popularity continued through some of the Qing, eventually being replaced by slightly more curved sabers. So they continued to be in use, but they weren't as popular as in their heyday, perhaps in the Ming. The construction on this is just great for its price, which is, I believe, about $400 plus shipping. It's the proportions on it, the pattern welding on the blade is lovely. I don't know how much of it's going to pick up on camera. I have it oiled right now, but you'll be able to, you can see the polish brings out the very light pattern welding design. The fittings here are of cast iron, is how it's described, so this isn't a brassy material. They have a minor ability to corrode if you're not careful, so after handling you'll probably want to clean it. The wrapping is a very comfortable, I believe this particular wrapping is made of cotton and stained, and you can see the wood core underneath with a little bit of a brass fitting here. It's obviously got a lanyard for hand retention, so you slip your hand around and you grab it here, and as you're doing your cuts, this prevents it from taking off on you. Something, again, you see in plenty of historical examples. Usually they're missing, but you can see the hole where it would be, and we have plenty of examples from artwork showing the hand through the lanyard while either operating the sword or just holding onto the sword. The scabbard is worth mentioning also. It's very well constructed. At this price point, you're usually left with not much of any scabbard at all. But all of the fittings are very tight and snug. The scabbard slide is where it should be. None of the cast elements have any signs of roughness. It fits wonderfully inside. If I can get it in. It fits wonderfully inside. It's oily, so it probably will try to come out if I shake it. But with just a little tug, it'll slip right out. And it's just a lovely design on the whole. There's the stitching on the faux leather, I believe it's called, the animal-friendly leather is really nice. And the sword on the whole is just a delight to handle. I brought the preceding sword that we had talked about, the new YanLingDao, as a point of comparison, just because it's kind of interesting to see the two of them side by side. That's a civilian saber, and in comparison, the military saber starts with a much thicker spine. So it starts with much thicker shoulders, and obviously it doesn't have the heavy, wide, cleaving tip that the civilian saber does. This one was designed to be able to have to contend with armor and to be able to deliver heavy thrusts, whereas the civilian one really was dealing in a more armorless environment, dealing with textiles. It provides a more intimidating appearance to some degree. It shows its presence. It makes its presence known very quickly with this large flaring tip. So the idea being that if you're in your house in the middle of the night and have to grab a weapon for an intruder, there's no question as to what you're picking up when you flash this around, compared to something more narrow that might be a jian, might be some duandao. The new Dao certainly cuts a striking presence, but this weapon allows for a little bit more finesse to be presented, and certainly allows for greater point control and more. It has much less resistance to flexibility for delivering those thrusts when presenting with a resisting target. So even though we're talking about just two designs that are probably about 400 years apart, there's still a lot of similarities that you can see between the late Qing and mid-Ming design. You can see hallmarks of similar design elements. You're still talking about discards. You still have very gentle curves in the blade and similar length in the blade, although both of them admittedly have different blade lengths that they dealt with, that they came attached with. Anyway, I could talk about the Yan-Ling-Dao forever, but this is easily one of my favorite swords to practice with. It cuts like a dream. It handles wonderfully. The grip works very well in my hand. It has a squared off handle, but it fits very well even with my very large hands. What are you doing? Go do yourself a favor. Go out and pick the sword up right now. It is wonderful. Until next time, take care.